podcasts and even in video on YouTube. Today, we are back with another multi review episode. Tons to catch up on, some in the horror realm, some in the thriller realm. Summer box office season is kind of in full swing right now. I've seen a lot of money coming from animation, and with Twisters coming out this weekend, we've actually been seeing a fair amount of money going to that. And so Glenn Powell and the spirit of America seems to be alive as far as what I'm seeing online. Pretty good cinema score as well, but we'll get to Twisters in just a little bit. The first film I kind of want to just jump in and talk about is one that I've seen talked about a ton online in the last couple weeks. One that has kind of been building in its film mythology for a few months online, as far as what I would see critics talking about. And that's a film called Longlegs, directed and written by a guy named Oz Perkins. Longlegs and the discussion around it has been kind of fascinating to see. It was something that I didn't know was quite like a serial killer type film, sort of procedural, FBI, investigatory type stuff. But there's also some level of demonic possession and all sorts of heebie-jeebie kind of stuff going on there. And I didn't necessarily know that going in, because pretty much all I had read online for months now, it feels like, is, Longlegs is the scariest movie of the decade. Granted, that's only 2020 to 2024. But you hear this a lot, especially with horror. I feel like I see this every other month with horror, the scariest film since X, Y, and Z. So Longlegs being the scariest film of this decade, obviously kind of perks your interest a little bit. Just, you'd have to be foolish not to kind of keep an eye on it. It's coming from Neon. It's got Micah Monroe, who, if you've seen It Follows, The Guest, countless other Scream Queen appearances by her. She's just a terrific actress. And then you know that Nicolas Cage is in this film, serial killer sort of character, and you don't really get a clear picture of what he looks like. They've been very deceptive with that in the film's marketing, and I hope you haven't had it spoiled for you online, because it's definitely a freakish sight to behold. But Longlegs, kind of inspired by Seven, Zodiac, Silence of the Lambs. You're following this young FBI agent who's kind of got more than an inclination as far as the paranormal goes. And you're kind of following this descent into just despair and, real grittiness. It's not a happy movie, and it's not necessarily going to play out, I would say, like Seven or Zodiac. And this is, again, where it's tough to hear about something, have a genuine interest for it. Then you start seeing people compare it to other things, or say that, yes, it's the scariest movie in the last 5 years. Yes, it's just like Zodiac. It's just like these. And you can certainly see where Perkins took inspiration from those films, because the way the movie is shot is just kind of freakishly dimly lit. There's a lot of empty space that's not quite entirely black in the film as well, where you're just kind of left feeling like feels like there's something lurking in the corner. It's those camera shots where it feels like you're in a bush watching something, and something's probably going to come into frame, or you're just scanning anxiously, kind of looking around at like, okay, what's coming next? I know the music's too eerie. It's too still of a frame right now. And I really, really enjoyed the camera work in the film. I think it works really well to kind of engross you into this experience. And whereas a lot of people might compare it to some of those serial killer procedurals, after sitting with it a little bit now, I would almost kind of liken it to the experience I had watching Scott Derrickson's Sinister, because Sinister was a movie that maybe outright doesn't have a ton of jump scares. It's not like scary and like oh my God, I'm dying. I need to cover my eyes because that was so horrifying to watch. But there is a level of despair and just like uneasiness you get when watching Sinister, and watching in either slow motion or just with no music, just some like horrible crimes, horrible ways to kill people and families or things like that. And I just remember watching that movie for the first time And it was so unsettling. It was just skin crawling, like, this is more terrifying than all the blood and guts and gore that I've seen in all these other horror movies, because it feels real and it feels dark and it really sits with you for a while. I mean, it's still a movie that today I could think about every one of the scenes where the people are killed in that film and how they're kind of done with the Super 8 footage, and just Ethan Hawke watching it too and just crying and feeling like it is a very unsettling experience to watch, but it works so effectively because of that, I think. And they kind of blend some of that supernatural with the real world pretty damn well. And so for me, watching Longlegs was a very similar type deal. You know, this one might be a little more involved, a little bit more action, but a very similar feeling of just like, oh man, I'm feeling queasy. This just doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. And for like 2/3 of the movie for Longlegs, super solid. I think towards the third act, I'm not saying things fall apart a little bit, but I think where they were kind of heading with the story, it doesn't take a dramatic turn. It just feels like okay, that's the reveal, or so that's what this is all about, huh? And it just feels not too on the nose, but it doesn't end things in the fashion that maybe you were like, all right, this was a great, not that there has to be a great ending for your characters either, but just something that satisfies the narrative, or something that, it leaves you feeling like, oh my God, what? And so again, everything's kind of a slower burn here, but Longlegs is super unsettling. I think that if you're looking for something horror adjacent, thriller like, definitely a lot to dissect there. I think I will probably go and see this movie again while it's in theaters, knowing what I know now, kind of looking for some of those other things. It's definitely one I think that will play better on a second watch, partially because you know what to look for. And some of that's also creepy too, is because you're like, how did I just miss half of that the first time around? It's probably because you were so anxious at all this negative space that you're looking at. So Oz Perkins definitely has crafted something really unique, really, really enjoyable. Uh, and I think, you know, ending aside, totally solid film. Micah Monroe, as always, is fantastic. Nicolas Cage, he's a super freak, but you'll understand what I mean. It's also kind of cool because Oz Perkins, like in a span of 15 months, shot 3 horror thriller films. So I believe Longlegs is the first of those 3, and the other 2 have distribution as well. So those will probably be coming out within the next year as well, which I'm definitely curious to see more from this director, more along this kind of storyline. These are the kind of horror-ish films that I definitely find myself drawn more towards, uh, simply because there is just that aspect of some reality in there outside of everything else that's maybe a little bit more fantasy-like. But moving right along is a film that I had a chance to check out. It took me a little while to get to it. It was one that I missed at SIFF 2024 this year, but Keith Cooper won the Best Actor award for this movie from the festival. And in a festival that was full of just incredible films like Sing Sing that really highlight what art can do as far as rehabilitating a person, as far as allowing you to look at your life in a different way and grow. This movie, Ghostlight, happened to be playing at the same time in the festival. A very similar sort of sentiment just about the arts, what it can do for a person, and how you can grow through tragedy, through letting yourself become emotionally vulnerable. And so Ghostlight was one I missed, really wanted to see, especially after hearing so many close friends watched it, loved it. I would say if you're prone to theater, if you've participated in anything like theater, band, if you make music, if you paint, if you do anything kind of like that, if you write, if you do something where you are being vulnerable and you're putting yourself out there, I think already this is sort of a film that will speak to you in a certain way, maybe more so than it does for others. But I think the beauty of it too is that it is all about a man who could not be farther connected with the arts, who really is holding a tremendous amount of grief with a tragedy that's happened to his family. and finding an outlet to not only process some of that emotion, but to kind of become a different person for a little while. And there's something that, as far as acting, actors, writers go, that world of creating stories, so much of why we love watching movies and why we love reading stories is for X amount of time. I don't have to think about what's plaguing me in the real world. You don't have to be confronted with the things that are ailing you. If only for just a little bit, you can pretend to be somewhere else. You can go somewhere else for a little and you can live a fanciful story. You could also take in a tale that is, so tragic and heartbreaking in ways it makes you appreciate more what you have in this world. And so Ghostlight follows this construction worker. His name is Dan, played by Keith Kupferer. And, he's having a hard time at work. He's having a hard time with his family. They've just kind of experienced a pretty tragic loss in their family. It's somewhat alluded to in the background. I don't think it's necessarily a spoiler, but just early on, you can tell that they're reeling from some sort of tragedy, and it's really kind of fractured the family. The mother is fairly inconsolable. She wants to be doing a billion different things maybe to keep her mind off of it, but she's trying to keep it together. They've got a daughter who's in high school, who is acting out, whose language is just incredibly profane at all times of day. She's causing trouble in school. He's having a hard time focusing when he's at work. And, you kind of see just how maybe how people disregard construction workers, or just this idea of, people speeding through a construction zone, paying no mind to these people. And this idea of you're already feeling the entire weight of the world on you. And then some jackass in a sports car nearly hits you and makes you feel even more worthless because he's going to choose to make fun of your profession, or he's going to choose to degrade you in some way. And these things do happen, and these sentiments in the world are real, whether it's you're acting, you're doing something in the arts, or recording things like this. That probably doesn't make you a lot of money. Go get a real job. I'm sure anyone who's done anything in the arts or even outside of the arts, if I had $1 for every time someone said, "Oh, that's not a real job," you got to do, there's like 4 real jobs out there is what it really sounds like for people. And then everything else is just kind of something else, I guess. But, and I mean that, as someone who has done the arts their whole life and thinks that's a whole load of crap. There's a billion, I think COVID showed us all that there's a billion different jobs out there that are pretty damn essential to the happiness, the well-being, and so much more out there. But Dan, struggling at work, finds himself needing to take some time, and happens to be that near kind of where they're doing their construction, there's a theater group, mostly adults, putting on a performance of Romeo and Juliet. And one of the women, Rita, who's played by Dolly De Leon, kind of sees him struggling, finds this as an opportunity to say, "Hey, I need your help real quick. I need you to help me with something. No, just come on. Come on." She'd already kind of asked him earlier in the film, "Can you guys keep it down? We're doing something." And so when he joins this group, he's just kind of asked to sit down and read, thinks it's really odd, has never really spoken in front of people before, doesn't know Romeo and Juliet. Everyone there, though, was just so welcoming and so warming, just immediately inviting him in, not necessarily asking him about his real life, but hey, come and play this character with us for a little bit. You got a sweet old lady who's kind of giving him little tips and tricks just for some of the memorization and reading. And of course, he's like, I'm not coming back here, you guys. But, you spend a little bit of time away from that, and he's naturally curious. And so he starts to ask his daughter, what's this whole Romeo and Juliet thing about? How do you memorize your lines? And, through just that connection, you see immediately how his relationship with his daughter could start to get better, or they could grow a little bit closer. And as time goes on, you kind of see how much of his own life is written in this story, the complications of love, of tragedy and loss. And so much of his life almost ends up being represented in what he's kind of performing now. And I really don't want to go into too much more detail than that. Other than it's really cool to watch someone have a transformative experience like that, because especially for men, I would say most people probably know this, but it's not always the easiest as far as communicating your emotions, kind of talking about what's really affecting you. And so, you find your little outlets, there's little things you do, but this is something where I've always felt this. Anytime I've read a really tremendous script, it really forces you to kind of think about life as a whole. It forces you to think about, I think, so many different situations in your own life, how you would tackle things when you think about applying this to your family life, anything kind of like that. I think it really, art at its best, grows us as people, gives us more space for love, for empathy, for understanding. And I think it allows us to kind of, I don't want to say move on from the things that we've experienced, but it really does help you maybe come to more of a peace with those things as well. So Ghostlight, a beautiful, beautiful movie. It's playing in limited release right now. I imagine it'll probably be on VOD and rental soon enough. Is a smaller movie, but my God, does it tell such an important, large, and universal story. I can completely understand why Keith Cooper won the award at SIFF. Just a fantastic, fantastic movie that, if you have the opportunity, is completely worth your time. Another film I kind of want to touch on before we get to Twisters and our big release for this week is a film called La Bête, or The Beast, which, from what I can tell, this is another case of those, that I'm getting dates here from 2021, 2023, 2024. Looks like maybe they shot and finished the film in 2021. But COVID time and everything, and this being, I believe, a French and Canadian kind of production combo, it maybe sat on the shelves for a little bit, looking for a distributor, waiting for a good time to release. So maybe played some festivals or played over in France. 2023, now in 2024. It enjoyed a kind of brief theatrical run. It's now available for rental and VOD. This is a very interesting movie. It's a sci-fi film based on, it's like a 1930s sort of novel. This idea that in the future, artificial intelligence is going to start taking over jobs. It's going to start taking over for human beings. And while it will not entirely eliminate humans from the workforce, artificial intelligence knows it can do 80% of these jobs better than humans because they don't have emotion. There's no, and emotion being the biggest word, kind of the large umbrella encapsulating the fact that you've got anger, you've got fear, you've got even, there's so many different ways a human could respond in any kind of job that maybe would not be to the letter of what that position is. And so essentially, sometime in the mid 2020s, it's like up to like 2044 maybe, artificial intelligence is so ingrained that people are seeking out a process called purification, where artificial intelligence and these computers will kind of go into your DNA and they will strip away all these different layers of trauma that you have experienced in your lifetime. And this is where, again, the science fiction aspect of things really does come into play, because kind of like a cloud atlas, this film explores multiple, years, multiple lifetimes of these two individuals who seem kind of drawn towards one another every time they're reborn in any different place in time. But the story kind of remains the same. They've never really had a chance to pursue what could be a forbidden love. So Léa Seydoux, who plays Gabrielle Monnier, is our main character. The film jumps through time quite a bit. There's a lot of nonlinear storytelling going on here. There is some more so when she's actually kind of going into these DNA stripping tests. But, we see her in almost 3 different lifetimes, past, present, future-ish, is kind of the impression you get. And George McKay is the same character essentially throughout these times too. But the most prominent one he plays is Louis Lewinsky. But hundreds of years ago, they were back in France and they're wearing elegant ball gowns. And the real story just revolves around this idea that Léa Seydoux' character, in every lifetime that she has lived, feels this just deep fear that something catastrophic is going to happen to her, almost immobilizing to the point where, she can feel this presence of evil, or she can feel that something maybe has happened to her in the past as well. And so in all of these lifetimes, these two characters are kind of brought together, whether or not they're both married, one's not. You can see how they keep re-entering each other's lifetimes. And you also can feel this connection that's just as strong throughout all three, but maybe where they are in time affects their love story or what their possibility could kind of be. There's lots of omens and weird mysticism kind of in the background, just as far as it relates to what their story as a whole might be. It's a very interesting movie. Very like it has some Cronenberg-esque feelings to it. Just some of these moments, almost in like Baron Harkonnen's oily little bathtub that he's got in Dune, where you're kind of laying down, waiting for these memories and these past traumas to be kind of replayed for you so they can strip them away. There's a lot of unsettling imagery in here that they use quite well, just with how perfect and clean all the streets and everything in these buildings are in the future, because there's all this lack of human interaction out there. There's almost no need for them other than what their, I'm sure, slave labor force could be, because that's what always ends up happening. They can use humans for one or two things. Certainly don't need our intelligence, though, as it turns out. But the film really does a lot of mind twisting, I want to say mind fuckery almost, pardon my French, but just with how your story is switching, or what one character is perceiving to be their past, how they might have influenced that. Is there an aspect where the AI is kind of potentially implanting memories or this trauma, keeping you at bay? Because the entire idea of purging yourself of these traumas is that you can essentially level up, work a better job in the current workforce. But because you still have emotion that's tied to you, it's too overwhelming for us to entrust you with certain duties. So a very all-encompassing look at what the future could be like. Is our past important? Are the things that we felt important? This idea of, we're just going to make you better. You're going to close your eyes and you're going to open them and everything's going to be okay. You're going to be you, just less scared or just less emotional. But it's not a bad thing. And, Léa Seydoux' character is kind of wrestling with this the whole time, this idea of taking away these parts that make you who you are, that give you these senses of, maybe things are too good to be true here. Or maybe I'm not being told the entire picture. Or maybe people are trying to manipulate me. And it's a lot easier to manipulate someone who's a little more robotic or a little less emotional. So The Beast, very curious movie, very fascinating to watch. At almost 2.5 hours, it does kind of slow down here and there a little bit. I think it plays with a lot of really fascinating ideas. I think the ending definitely kind of sticks the landing that they're starting at. But just very fascinating, I'd say, more so than anything. It's not something I think I would return to watch. And I think to a degree, you've got to be a little bit partial to French filmmaking, the French language as well. The subtitles were perfectly fine. I didn't lose anything from it that way. I think the performances were all pretty terrific. But just one that, while it plays with interesting ideas, maybe it doesn't always capitalize on them in the best of ways. So I don't know. The Beast, it was one I've definitely wanted to check out for a while. I'm glad I watched it. Definitely gives you a lot of things to kind of talk about for sure. Shot very well. And, you'd be foolish not to want to watch Léa Seydoux or George McKay. So if you are interested in things like that, a little bit of French sci-fi could do the soul well. But now we're going to get into the real nitty gritty of why some of you may be here today, some of why I'm here today. That's because I went and I saw Twisters in IMAX, and I had a blast. I'm not going to lie. It was pretty fun. My dad, on my recommendation, probably went out and watched Horizon, Kevin Costner's Western epic, before it is kind of almost exclusively moved to VOD now. And me partially championing that film is because it is such a much better experience to have in the theater. The cinematography is amazing. It's a grand scale, but it's 3 hours. And I know it's not a brisk 3 hours. And so my dad goes and sees that. We kind of debrief and we talk about the movie. And then he goes and sees Twisters. And I get kind of the dual review, kind of, the similarities between the two. But for summer blockbuster, only one of those movies is actually consistently entertaining and will probably keep your attention the entire time. And that movie is Twisters. And early on, once these trailers came out for the film, and once they were doing this, what we'll call a legacy sequel, it doesn't really touch on the original, but we're playing off the same name and the similar ideas. So, the legacy sequel is what a lot of people have been doing recently in Hollywood, I would say. And it's interesting to note that Joseph Kosinski wrote the story for this film. He didn't direct it. But Joseph Kosinski of Top Gun Maverick, Tron Legacy, Oblivion, the upcoming F1 film with Brad Pitt. Kosinski knows action, and I think he really knows how to put together a summer blockbuster. He knows what to do to create an entertaining story that has incredible moments of breathlessness, of total oh my God, moments where you are kind of fearing all right, we might lose people that we care about actually here. Kosinski he's really great. And I'm really glad, as a Tron Legacy and Oblivion fan, I'm really glad that he's been getting a lot more play in Hollywood, that people are turning to him for his ideas, because he just gets movie making on a level that I think just connects with people instantly. I've seen some people watch Twisters and say, meh, I don't know what movie you were watching. And again, I would say when you see this in a format like IMAX, like Dolby, I heard the 4DX is just kind of nuts for this movie as you're shaking around in the chair the whole time, I don't ever go that far for my movies, but seeing this in IMAX was awesome. It was kind of frightening at times too. As someone who's never lived through a tornado, but has had family and tons of friends who kind of live between Texas and Oklahoma in that Tornado Alley area, I have heard firsthand from plenty of people about how terrifying being in a tornado is, looking at that firsthand devastation and what it does to some of these small towns, to families. And so watching some of these trailers for Twisters, there's a part of me that was really curious how many people would go out and see this movie. If you've got a large enough Midwest base that would go out and watch this movie, being so close to this kind of natural disaster, it'd be like making a hurricane movie. And then you'd be wondering, all right, well, in Florida, Louisiana, Texas, is that appealing to people because it's terrifying and it actually has happened there? And it is that side of, again, it is just a movie, but it is a reflection of things that do happen. And because it's a reflection of that, I really did appreciate within the story this attention to the people who live in this area, the people who are affected by these natural disasters, and this idea that, it really is not easy to pick everything up and just move, much as everybody online wants to say, we'll just go live somewhere else, go do something better, go get a better job. Again, people on the internet will just say anything with zero regard to understanding how actual life kind of works. So for the people who do live there, I really did enjoy this focus on, at least scientifically, what can we do to make things safer out here, to have a positive effect on the people who are negatively affected by all of this. And granted, that's not the whole story necessarily, but I just from the jump, it kind of surprised me about the movie that there was a little bit more heart there, that there was a little bit more science as well here. So Daisy Edgar Jones plays Kate. Kate's a younger scientist who, with a crew around her, including Anthony Ramos, who plays Javi, were going to try to manipulate a tornado. They were going to be using different chemical compounds, trying to release them into the tornado to gather some data. Number one, just about how the tornadoes form, what it's like inside of one, what kind of helps dissipate one, and to see, can we actually get rid of a tornado? We just got to find a small enough one. And, we're all having a good time. We've done stuff kind of like this before. They're tornado chasers. They're out in Oklahoma. And, it's like Prometheus. We were so wrong. Things just go so horribly to start that you'd understand her never wanting to go back and be a part of tornado hunting again. So some years passed. She's working in a weather station because she's a great meteorologist. She knows how to read the data in a way that most people don't. She's great at predicting these things. So, years later, Javi comes back to her. Anthony Ramos comes back and he says, hey, I'm working with a company. We need to get this kind of telemetry and this data on tornadoes. We just need to get close enough. We need to find the right ones. This could really help save lives because they're experiencing a record number of tornadoes and natural disasters kind of in that tornado alley. And, begrudgingly, she's kind of brought back in. It's like, okay, as long as we're helping people and we could kind of get some really unique scientific data, some years have passed. We've got our hands on better tech. And once she gets down there, there's this whole squeaky clean science team that Javi's got. And then on the other side of things, you've got Glen Powell rolling up in his big rig truck, blasting country music, playing Tyler Owens, the Tornado Wrangler out of Arkansas. He and his country crew coming in without their PhDs, but using drones, launching fireworks up tornadoes, YouTube live streaming. They've got the works, and it is just such a polar opposite approach to doing some of this as scientifically as the other team is. And as Glen Powell does, he's just a charmer. He comes in naturally with a huge smile, thinks she's a city girl because she's from New York, but, she's not going to let him know that. And really interestingly, this film is far less like, we've got two attractive leads and we're going to put them together naturally and they're going to go through trials and tribulations and they're going to end up together. That's really easy to do. And maybe I could feel the hesitation in the film to kind of put them together. But I feel like the way they did it, like Daisy Edgar Jones is the star of the movie. As much as Glen Powell comes into the frame, completely captivates your attention, charms your socks off, she's still the focus. And what I liked is they kind of kept things professional in the sense that while they do have some tense, great moments together though too, the science behind everything, the goal that they're working towards kind of remains the focus. And it's not a spoiler, but just as the film goes on and you see her take the lead on so many things, I just kept thinking like, man, in any other movie, the guys would have been like, no, I'll go do this. Like, you stay here, girl. Or, we've got to make out before this happens, and then I'll go sacrifice myself for you. I'm not saying there's sacrifice. This is just me espousing on typical movie formula and really appreciating where this film kind of deviated from that, because I felt like it had more of an effect for the type of story that they were telling. And I really enjoyed the supporting cast kind of around them as well. David Corenswet, the new Superman, was in the movie. I think kind of like the last movie he did, that Greatest Hits. I don't want to say he was underused or just used improperly, but I don't know. I didn't get a lot from him, oddly enough. And it's one of those, as we're building towards this new Superman, and I'm a fan of his and what he's capable of doing, I was just kind of like, oh man, I wanted a little more from him. But Anthony Ramos, on the other hand, is someone who every movie, every performance that I've seen him do, there's just a level of authenticity I feel like that he brings to his characters, where I know this is a fictitious character. I know these are lines that you're reading, but the humanity that he brings to so many of his performances, I think, is just something that strikes me as it's something that you don't often get, even in the Transformers movie that he did last year. Um, a lot of it works so well, I think, because he's so good and because he is just so natural and he brings so much of himself and real life experience into these roles. And I think it's just enjoyable to watch him work, number one. But I think his character contributes in a lot of ways that are pretty cool. Katie O'Brien pops up into the film for just a little bit. You've also got Brendan Perea, some of these kind of supporting characters to Glenn Powell's crew, this wild country ragtag team, Tornado Wranglers. But man, I had a great time. I had a really fun time watching this movie. It is exceeding box office expectations right now, which is killer. I think I read it opened pretty much right around the same numbers as Dune 2, and they said like maybe 800K less than Oppenheimer opening weekend. And remember, Oppenheimer had the whole Barbenheimer effect really helping elevate some of that as well. And so it's kind of cool to see that. Inside Out, not the Minions, but Despicable Me, they just keep chugging along, printing money. Deadpool comes out next weekend, so that's going to be another. I'm sure they're going to make money hand over fist on that one. It feels kind of nice, just that in some ways, that the box office and the theatrical experience is starting to kind of return to a little bit of normalcy, we'll say. Obviously, there's still stuff coming out incredibly quickly on VOD, which kind of a fun little segue here. If you are looking for something at home, I know I've been talking about tons of films that are more on the blockbustery side, especially if you're going to watch something in the comfort of your own home. But if you're looking for a good rental, if you're looking for a good purchase for something that honestly the whole family could watch and everyone would enjoy, Thelma is now available to rent, and not to stream, but to rent or to own at home. Thelma was just such a fun and sweet movie. Little old grandmother gets scammed. Nobody in the family necessarily wants to go help get the money back because she's safe. But this is a grandma who watches Mission Impossible movies. This is a woman who would not be deterred just by the sentiments of her family, who is capable in her own right, knows that she can still get around and make things happen, and goes on independent ops to go get her money back. Part comedy, part family drama. It is just so great. June Squibb is just so sweet, but she is also so snappy and she's so funny. I've got an interview on YouTube, also linked in our website, and I think on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. I got to talk with her, the filmmaker, another star of the film. It was just such a fun discussion. For being 90 some years old, she is just so lively, doing her own stunts in the movie. It's adorable. You will laugh. You will probably tear up a little bit. There's so many things that you will probably just like, wow, this is a universal experience people have, either trying to explain things and talk to their parents or their grandparents. Thelma is just a blast. I really loved that movie. And as we kind of get to, well, now we're really almost halfway through the year. We're past that. We are past that. But a lot of people start kind of looking at what has been some of the best of what I've seen in this first half of the year. Now, I've seen probably close to 50 plus movies. Film festivals definitely help give you a little bump. So I just wanted to highlight, 5 to 10 films maybe that really stuck out to me, most of which you can watch at home right now. Now that we're halfway through the year, what have I enjoyed? What do I think has kind of really stood out as far as quality at the box office? I'll mention a couple that either don't necessarily have distribution yet or kind of play in that limited release, but you'll probably have a better chance maybe catching it on VOD. Some of them, are also kind of still playing right now. And maybe it wasn't in the first half of the year, but now that we're into July, I'm still just going to mention them. even if I've talked about them before. But yeah, I've been toying around. I think my top three for the year, though, are pretty solid. I feel pretty strongly about these three films, just all a little bit different, all unique stories from filmmakers just working at the top of their game. Uh, in no particular order, the first three films I would recommend to anybody this year would be Dune Part 2, Civil War, and Challengers. They're the three films I find myself going back to the most, whether it's just to watch clips, whether it's just the discussion around them. With Dune, it's anything from production design, Hans Zimmer score, just the evolution of Chalamet at the end of the film, the evolution of Zendaya's character as well, Javier Bardem and the Mahdi. Just Dune 2 is blockbuster storytelling on an unparalleled level. Denis Villeneuve is just built different, as the kids would say. He makes movies. He doesn't even just make movies. He makes and crafts experiences unlike anything else out there. And it just is the perfect bookend to that first chapter that he started back in 2020 or 2021. Benefits from playing off of the first film so well. But Dune Part 2, just incredible filmmaking. Civil War, obviously a very touchy film this year for numerous reasons. Not even the political discourse that's happening now, post-assassination attempt and whatnot. Before all of that, a film that a lot of people picked apart for not picking sides politically, not condoning or, I don't know, criticizing certain aspects of politics or people in the movie. And the further away we get from that film, the one thing I will give people is I think they could do just a little bit better job of setting up why the country's in disarray. You kind of, again, it's kind of background, like watching the film with subtitles definitely helps fill that in a little bit more than maybe watching it in the theater the first time. But the idea is this president is trying to give themselves a third term. Our basic democracy, our basic rights are being challenged. The things that have guided this country for 200 plus years are being stripped away. And so what you have is a people's response to this man trying to seize too much power and kind of rewrite parts of the Constitution. And then, we jump to 15 or so months later when the film actually kind of takes place. And again, you could go into detail and you could say, like, what happened to the Republicans? What happened to the Democrats? What happened to the Tea Party? I want to know what happened to other countries. That's not what we're talking about. It's not that movie. And 15 months after our democracy kind of crumbles because the government shifts its priorities and decides that it's going to go on independent ops and against the wishes of the people, Republican and Democrat, that doesn't matter. And there's even a scene in the movie for people who are like, no, come on. You got to tell me that's bad. You got to tell me the Republicans are the ones that are killing people. Why do you have Democrats killing people? I'm like, man, you are so far removed from political affiliation. Even right now, after everybody watched the great debate between the two sleeping giants, it was just kind of like everybody had a pretty similar feeling. Like, how are these our options? How is this our best representation of the two-party system that most people are already fed up with as it begins? And we can't go third party, so you just have to pick one or the other. So many people, I think, are already so divorced from politics, and the idea that just because I believe X, Y, and Z does not mean I am this person. Just because so-and-so owns a gun does not mean that they're a Republican. They could be a registered Democrat. It doesn't matter. When the government has gone belly up and the whole world seems to be in disarray, what Civil War focuses on is survival. And you see what people are willing to do to keep their family, to keep themselves alive. And you also see the extents that people will go to protect their liberties. You see the extents people will go in desperation. So it's maybe not the most fun movie, but I think it tells a really incredible story. and highlights again just some of that side of what journalists and the risks that they will go to in order to take a shot, in order to tell a story, trying to be non-biased in that as well. Again, and a lot of people are like, how can they be non-biased? You have to know this is all wrong. And again, journalism, people are so, I don't know, so much has shifted where it's rather we would hear an opinion rather than an actual factual journalistic report. And it's hard to get information that is unbiased, that is just the actual information without commentary or certain things that kind of lead you to maybe feel a certain way. And that goes for anything, any side, any issue, whatever. So Civil War challenges you on a lot of levels for sure. But I think it's brilliant filmmaking from a director who's not from America, who kind of gives us an objective outsider perspective, who is not caught up in rah Republican or I'm a liberal, whatever. That just, it doesn't matter. So don't watch the movie thinking of it like that, because I think if you approach it like that, you're just going to be frustrated, like a lot of people who wanted it to be really political and who wanted it to pick a side and say that one side or the other is wrong and right, because it's not that kind of movie. And that's not the kind of world that we live in, truthfully. So if you can swallow some hard truth pills, I think it's a fantastic movie. Definitely a cautionary tale, but sparks a really interesting dialogue as well. And the last film, speaking of challenges and challenging you as a film, Luca Guadagnino's Challengers, with Mike Feist, Josh O'Connor, and Zendaya, the tennis movie that disrupted the world. Just, a great story. Number one, if you're a fan of tennis like I am, certainly makes it a little more engaging and a little more enjoyable than what you might watch for a few hours on TV. It just, having the Nine Inch Nail guys, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, doing the soundtrack, phenomenal. Just have seen a billion memes about playing those songs in the club. I play them in my car. It's an awesome soundtrack. Definitely gets you moving. But Challengers is just a unique drama, unique story of this sort of love triangle. And, for a lot of people, it feels more like an Italian or French film because they're like, oh, love triangle, but two of them are guys, and what's going on here? And this passing of power and the different power dynamics that people can hold over one another. Just a really interesting dissection of love, of admiration, of jealousy, fueling sometimes the power you have within you. Just this idea of, what can you accomplish when someone has your back? What are the things that kind of hinder your progress or kind of mentally barricade you from being at the level that you want to be? I think all three performances are fantastic. Zendaya, it's probably her most mature performance to date. She just kills it as Tashi Duncan. But Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor, I tell you, for me, I guess I have seen them in West Side Story, La Camera, and a couple other things before. Didn't really recognize them going into the movie, but afterwards I was like, dude, these guys are going to be stars. These guys, there's just an energy they have. There's just, again, kind of like Anthony Ramos, an authenticity they bring to their performances. It just feels completely, they don't even know there's a camera on them. And so for this movie, that might be like a little eyebrow raising, like, what goes on when that camera stops rolling? Who's to say? But I think that's also a sign of a great film when the actors can kind of convince you, like, are they really like having a throuple? Is this like, oh my God? I've talked to a lot of people about the movie, and it definitely, I would say for Americans, maybe the narrative challenges just a little bit. It's not totally what people are used to seeing. But I think it's a great film. I think it's fantastic, high energy, tons of fun, great story, great payoff, just fantastic cinematic moments. Definitely check that out. And outside of those three, Furiosa, Mad Max Saga is one I've watched at least a couple times now, which, I think my appreciation and love for it has grown each subsequent watch. Just awesome movie. Monkey Man by Dev Patel, Still one that I find myself going back to show people if they need a new recommendation, or there's like, what do we watch that you haven't seen yet? I'm like, I've watched it, but I would watch Monkey Man again, and I have. Um, you could call it John Wick in India. I think it's pretty reductive. Dev Patel, first time directing, just wears his heart and his cinematic appreciations on his sleeve. I think maybe there's a couple moments still that don't totally work or are a little on the nose, but it's just fun to see him take on a new challenge and just kick ass with his first feature film. Monkey Man's badass. That's just got to be said. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, another one that I just have, again, probably watched like 3 times now. I'm a big Planet of the Apes fan, and this one just scratches all the right itches for me. Tons of monkeys, very few humans. I've been really enjoying watching some of kind of like the behind the scenes, deleted scenes type stuff. It's available right now for rental, for purchase digitally, not quite yet on DVD, but you can still watch some of those special features. It's cool to kind of watch the motion capture and then compare it side by side to the actual film. And I think when they release the full version on DVD, there's going to be a way to watch almost all of it with that, either side by side or watching that motion capture side of it. Because when you see what these actors are really doing and the humanity in their performance, and then you compare it to the final product, I mean, it's just uncanny. Weta Digital, everybody who works on these films, hats off, because they only get better, I swear, as time goes on. I just loved Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Late Night with the Devil would be, another one as far as us talking about some of the better horror films of the year, different things. David Desmalchian in his first starring role. Old new style, Johnny Carson style TV host, a lot of practical horror style effects, plays a lot with I don't know what's real and what's not, and they do such a good job all the way throughout the film, keeping you guessing. Very fun for that kind of throwback style as well, though. Terrific acting. Desmalchian is fantastic. Totally different for horror thriller or what you might expect. More of a throwback style film, but really, really enjoyed that one. And then, just a few others that I would say, Love Lies Bleeding was one I really enjoyed from A24. Kristen Stewart led vehicle there. Kind of a little bit of a funky ending, but still enjoyed the majority of it, I would say. There's a film called Dee Dee that is either playing now or will be coming out in the next week or so, kind of following this young Asian American man growing up in North California back when he was, middle school, almost going into high school age. A look at that coming of age, who you're trying to be at that time, the friends that you're keeping, making, losing, just the uncertainty of your family situation at home and how that affects things, wanting to seem cool for people. It's just classic coming of age, very funny, has some great emotional beats as well. Really, really like Dee Dee. Thelma would be another one, as I mentioned earlier, that I would totally, totally see again. Sing Sing, kind of like Ghostlight, is another film that touches on just that importance of the arts. In this particular case, at the Sing Sing Penitentiary, talking about this program that helps, the rehabilitation through the arts, that helps these different inmates not only reconcile with perhaps what they've done in the past, but grow to be better people and growing to help others in that kind of prison community as well. And understanding there is a better way to live your life. There is a way to live more authentically. There is a way to change for the better for the people around you. Just a powerful, powerful movie led by Coleman Domingo that I have no doubts will probably end up on a lot of people's year-end lists. So keep an eye out for Sing Sing. And then Bob Trevino likes it. It doesn't have distribution yet. I saw it's going to be playing in Nashville and Melbourne at a couple film festivals. Tracy Lehman just created something so beautiful and so raw and so pure with that film. Barbie Ferreira and John Leguizamo, just phenomenal. I'm going to keep beating that drum for a while. If you happen to be in Nashville, if you happen to be in Australia, it is so worth making the trek to see. It is the human soul personified in film, and it will make you cry, it will make you laugh, and you will be a better person for watching it. Thank you so much again for the indulgence in what's now almost been an hour. I wrestle with how long these should be sometimes, or if people tune in for the entirety of this. So if you even listen to a minority of this, I really appreciate it. Thank you as always for tuning in. You can find us at NT Movie Reviews on all social media networks, podcast platforms, and even on YouTube. Stay tuned because next week we've got Deadpool. We've got the Olympics. I don't know. I'm probably going to talk about the Olympics in some of these recordings just because I'm going to try to watch them all. We're still going to be watching movies, though, so fear not. In the meantime, I hope I've given you at least 2 or 3 things you can go out and watch and kick off your own summer blockbuster as well. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.